then wear the gold hat if that will move her. If you can bounce high, bounce for her too, till she cry, lover, gold-hatted, high-bouncing lover, I must have you. This quote has been exceptionally striking for me ever since I first read The Great Gatsby in 11th grade, a century-old classic about opulence, the American dream, and just darn bad luck. And though this quote may not seem like anything crazy at first, what might be more interesting to find is that the author of this quote, Thomas Parke D'Anvillers, doesn't really exist. This is just a pseudonym of F. Scott Fitzgerald, author of the very book that this quote is placed in. So why do I care so much about it? Honestly, I just think it's kind of cool to have the confidence to fabricate a quote for the beginning of your own book, to set the tone so meticulously it involves breaking the fourth wall. But now let me also ask you, does this remind you of someone? Someone who changes their persona every so often to fit a different style or tone, and for a very specific artistic purpose? Yeah, me neither. So when I was talking to a friend of mine about the new Tyler the Creator album, I found there to be really striking similarities between Call Me If You Get Lost and The Great Gatsby, specifically between their protagonists, Tyler the Creator, or Tyler Baudelaire, or Bunny Hop, or Wolf Haley, whichever one of those, and Jay Gatsby. So could someone say that Tyler the Creator is really a modern Great Gatsby? Ah yes, hello everybody. Welcome to my summertime villa in Italy. Or wherever this is, I don't actually know. Before I really dive into everything, I just want to clarify that I'm not making statements about the actual guy, Tyler Okonma. When I say Tyler in this video, I'm referring to the way he's portrayed himself as a protagonist over the course of his discography. And if you're not already familiar with The Great Gatsby, what are you doing? You've had approximately 100 years to do the reading, but I will be providing a little context as we go through the video, so you don't get lost. So essentially, there's this guy called Jay Gatsby who has a mansion in New York. He made his money selling alcohol and doing other sussy baka business in the 1920s during Prohibition, when alcohol was banned. He lives across the bay from his crush, Daisy Buchanan, a frail and flighty woman who is married to a bona fide beefcake and total prick, Tom Buchanan, who is simultaneously extremely clingy and in an affair with another married woman. Their saga of drama is narrated by Nick Carraway, an honest but extremely judgmental guy who's trying to make a living in the city. He's Daisy's cousin and also lives next door to Gatsby, acting as a passive member in this drama circle. He documents the hilarity that ensues over the course of the novel. I'm not gonna do a summary of Tyler the Creator here. I'm just gonna assume that you've listened to at least some of Call Me If You Get Lost. If not, I'm surprised that you're here, but please nonetheless, stick around. So with that out of the way, let's get into it. Of all of Tyler the Creator's albums, the reason why I chose to talk about Call Me If You Get Lost here is for its candor about love, luxury, and inclusion of imagery from Tyler's whole discography. Also views. Mainly for views. However, there are some really interesting recurring symbols that I noticed both in this album and The Great Gatsby, starting with boats and water. Boats and water play a massive part in both the stories of Tyler the Creator and Jay Gatsby. In The Great Gatsby, water plays many roles, but it most significantly represents moments of great change and of great desire. For example, Gatsby's greatest character change began when he started working on a boat alongside a very wealthy man called Dan Cody. This experience taught him about wealth, diligence, and how he should behave when becoming the character of the Great Gatsby. Gatsby's tense reunion with Daisy occurs after 5 years in the pouring rain, and Gatsby is shot and killed in his swimming pool, subsequently being buried in the pouring rain too. These are all moments where Gatsby's character fundamentally and permanently changed. Gatsby and Daisy's houses are separated by a bay, which is often shrouded in mist. Their houses are so far and so obscured that the only thing really visible to Gatsby from Daisy's house is one very famous green light at her dock. Here, the water is representative of the class and social boundaries standing in between Gatsby and Daisy, therefore also representing Gatsby's desire. For Tyler, Water is often mentioned when he's engulfed by his own emotions. One example that sticks out really clearly in my mind is in Forward, where the latter half of that song is heavily centered around drowning. There, it represents Tyler's internal conflict, wondering how far his pursuit of material items and wealth can really go, and if he's making a sizable impact on the world. This especially makes sense since he'd just come off the release of Cherry Bomb, an album which was really divisive amongst critics and fans. Though I think the song Cherry Bomb goes really hard and is super underrated, but that's besides the point. This image of Tyler drowning in a pool is also visually reminiscent of Gatsby's death, with him also dying in a pool. Kinda gnarly. It's also funny to note that Leonardo DiCaprio played Gatsby in the 2013 Great Gatsby movie. Arguably his most famous role also involves drowning, as Jack in the Titanic. And also funny to note is that Tyler proclaimed his love for Leonardo DiCaprio in 1995 on the song Who Dat Boy. It's all connected, you see. But where Tyler and Gatsby are really similar is in their interactions with boats. Universally, an icon of having gotten ultra rich is when you're able to buy a yacht. Gatsby has 2 on his private beach adjoining his house, clearly a symbol of having made it, alongside the actual giant mansion that he lives in. Most of Tyler's bars about water and boats are also extremely braggadocious, such as Sir Baudelaire, where he mentions Geneva water's the best, Corso when he says I might buy a boat in Capri and I might as well cry in the ocean, and parts of his feature on Something to Rap About, where he says the lavish beat sounds like a boat that he hasn't bought yet. All of this is him mainly flexing his ability to travel all around the world and his general wealth. You could contrast this presence of water and boats during times of great success with the presence of great heat, indicating doom for our protagonists. For Gatsby, a heat wave occurs when he confronts Tom about his and Daisy's involvement, which is followed by a series of unfortunate events which comes to a boil with his murder. Additionally, there's this section in Gone Gone / Thank You which describes Tyler being in 90-degree weather with an umbrella, despite there being no chance of rain. This represents him being blindsided by his crush's inconsistency and the clouding of his own judgment due to his infatuation. You could say he's like doomed by love at this point. So it's just really interesting to see the many different ways Tyler the Creator and F. Scott Fitzgerald use water and boats as imagery in their creative works, and to compare the many ways that they converge and differ. But yeah, all this talk about boats and travel sure seems opulent, wouldn't you say?
It's opulence, baby.
To be honest, I don't know if opulent worked in that sentence, but it acted as a good segue, so whatever. On a surface level, there's a lot of descriptions of cool material items that Gatsby and Tyler both possess. From frequent mentions of yachts, Rolls Royces, giant decked out houses, and more, I can tell you without a doubt that these boys are absolutely loaded. I can't possibly give a better example of Tyler's flexing than the entirety of the song Blessed, where he recounts every major success he's had up until now. Also, the whole book of The Great Gatsby is about materialism and opulence and stuff, so I think you can see where I'm coming from. But one other interesting similarity between Gatsby and Tyler's stories is the significance of the color green. I, for one, am also a color green enjoyer. It's a lovely color. But green also acts as a really significant symbol of desire in these stories. Here, I'd like to go on a long tangent about the A Boy is a Gun video. I'm like genuinely obsessed with this video. There are so many visually appealing and unique shots in this video, and I feel like it perfectly encapsulates the story of Igor until this point, depicting the push and pull of love and wanting more and contempt and desperation and tons more. Tyler's favorite color is green too, if I remember correctly, and green plays a major role in this video. What might immediately come to mind are all the plants, topiary, and foliage presented throughout the video, which are all really cool to look at, but I wanted to focus in on one small scene in the video, which is of the green bathroom. In this moment in the story of Igor, Tyler's desire for his crush is almost palpable, but he's also wrestling with the fact that he deserves better than to be led on by this pretty white boy. And so the gnarly and intimate nature of this desire is encapsulated perfectly in this bathroom scene, where his crush just kinda swoops in and out like nothing's affecting him and nothing matters to him, while Tyler is clearly engulfed by his emotions, literally soaking in them in his tub. He's even wearing a little green heart ring, which I find symbolically really important and also just a dope piece of jewelry. He wants it to work out so bad, but it doesn't seem like it will. For the rest of the video too, he drapes himself in a green suit, representing the fact that he's been consumed by his desire. In a similar vein, the green in The Great Gatsby represents hope and desire, with Daisy's green light being the perfect representation of Gatsby's desire for being with her. Even when Gatsby started out working with Dan Cody, he was wearing a torn green jersey, emblematic of his desire to become more than his surroundings and social status. After getting everything he could possibly want, that green light and that girl he was down bad in 18 million K for were just barely out of reach. But green color symbolism aside, this brings me to my main point, which is the essence of the American dream reflected through intense materialism, and the general commentary on wealth reflected through these pieces of art. Both Tyler and Gatsby didn't come from extremely wealthy backgrounds, but they were able to achieve incredible success with their own unique skills and their dedication. Tyler used his fierce creative spirit and ingenuity to create art that has significantly shaped our generation, and Gatsby used nearly any means possible to get everything he wanted. This did initially come at the cost of public perception for both of them though, with Tyler's early music and controversies haunting him to this day, and Gatsby constantly being chastised by those of upper classes for being in an illegal line of work. But Tyler's success is all of his own merit and completely legitimate, whilst Gatsby's is illegal. The exploration of wealth between the two diverges here. For Tyler, especially in Call Me If You Get Lost, the mention of luxury items is obviously a flex, but it seems more like a celebration of having made it as an artist. He's able to get nice things as a result of creating something meaningful. But for Gatsby, his pursuit of wealth seems to be only for the sake of pursuing wealth and impressing Daisy. I'm not saying Tyler hasn't used his wealth to impress someone he's liked before, but it's different for Gatsby. More than anything, the pursuit is Gatsby's purpose, even being a little let down when he finally gets to meet with Daisy. Sometimes, the fantasy that you romanticize in your head is much more potent than reality ever could be. But hey, who gives a shit, right? What could all this stuff even be for anyway? Could it be for love? One of the most striking similarities between Tyler and Gatsby is their consistent involvement in love triangles, and how it plays a massive role in each of their narratives. As you could probably tell, The Great Gatsby's central plot focuses on Gatsby trying to be with Daisy despite her being married, since Gatsby thinks that she's still in love with him. On top of that, Daisy's husband, Tom, is undoubtedly an asshole to her. He's repeatedly shown to be violent and abusive, and is in an affair with another married woman. Also, I would get into this in more detail if it was more relevant to this essay, but Nick very much has feelings for Gatsby, describing him with a lot of care and affection, and excusing him for any possible misdeeds that he does. All the while, Nick is leading on Jordan, a girl he's set up with by the Buchanans, and a girl back in his hometown in the Midwest. So it's really more like a love octagon than a triangle. But yeah, jokes aside, the central plot is around the love triangle of Gatsby, Daisy, and Tom, where Gatsby and Daisy can't be with each other despite them sharing mutual feelings. This is really similar to the relationship that Tyler describes in Call Me If You Get Lost, especially on a track like Wilshire. Here, Tyler's trying to be with a girl who won't commit to being with him because she's already in a committed relationship. Funky parallel, right? This was one of the main reasons I wanted to do this video. These similarities manifest in even more crazy parallels throughout their stories. For example, Gatsby planning to secretly meet Daisy with the help of Nick, and Tyler trying to set up a meeting with his love interest at the start of Sweet. Or when Gatsby and Daisy finally get to dance together in his mansion, while Tyler sings "I Thought You Wanted to Dance" and "I'll Save a Dance Just for You." If you've been following the structure of the previous sections, I am going to talk about how they differ now. It's really interesting to compare the ways in which Tyler and Gatsby differ here, despite being in an extremely similar situation. Gatsby let his desire to be with Daisy consume his whole life, gaining his massive wealth just to be at a similar social level as Daisy, all the while he had an evident obsession with her, with the whole reaching out to the green light thing, and his insane attention to detail about their relationship. One could compare this to a different point in Tyler's life, where he was also in a love triangle, as described on his album Igor. In that album, Tyler is far more distraught at his love interest's decision to be with someone else. Lines from songs like Puppet and New Magic Wand exemplify this idea. Tyler was completely at the whims of the one he loved. It was total infatuation. However, where it all falls apart for Gatsby is where Tyler really shines. After the gut-wrenching relationship in Igor, Tyler reflects a much less toxic and a much more mature breakup at the end of Wilshire in Call Me If You Get Lost. A far cry from songs like I Don't Love You Anymore and Are We Still Friends? Being with Daisy has been the end goal of Gatsby's big American dream. Being that down bad for 5 years erupts in a fiery confrontation between Gatsby and Tom, leading to the subsequent deaths of Myrtle, Tom's mistress, and eventually Gatsby. As spectacularly cliche as it sounds, it seems like wealth doesn't really afford you everything that you want. I know for a fact that both these guys could basically fuck whoever they wanted. Tyler even says as much on Wilshire. Ultimately, it seems like one special person can fuck your whole life up, even if you don't fuck them. I caught her with my other hand. I haven't written the next part of this video yet. So I also got a pair of sunglasses for this video, which I forgot to put on with my pink outfit. So I'm just gonna do that really quick right now. Yeah, it's like a little spot of color amongst the like funeral attire I'm wearing, which is maybe foreshadowing? I wish I had contacts though, because it's very hard for me to read my script with these on. I am kind of blind. So it's not hard to see that Tyler and Gatsby are both spectacularly ambitious and restless people. Lines like this are scattered across Tyler's discography, but one of my personal favorite lines is, I'm a planet by the time you hear this, off of Garden Shed on Flower Boy, showcasing just how astronomical his aspirations are. And Gatsby went from being the son of two poor Midwestern farmers to an urban legend and a wealthy superstar. Evidently, both of these guys had very clear visions about their futures. Chapter 6 of The Great Gatsby is really important in establishing this fact, describing a universe of ineffable gaudiness that spun itself out in his brain every night as he went to bed, meaning that he dreamed of becoming this wealthy, party-throwing guy ever since he was a kid. We also get to see this Sigma grind set schedule that he kept for himself that he followed every day. Tyler himself also didn't let anything get in his way in terms of expressing himself, because he has his own music festival, produces music, directs videos, has his own clothing line, and tons of other epic stuff. They have also both been noted as godlike on many occasions. Again in chapter 6, Nick describes the careful and deliberate transformation of James Gatz, Gatsby's birth name, into Jay Gatsby, the character. He says Gatsby was, quote, a son of God, which, if anything, means just that, and he must be about his father's business, the service of a vast, vulgar, and meretricious beauty. Here, his father's business just denotes Gatsby's desire to become ultra-wealthy and glamorous. Nick's choice of words here establishes Gatsby as godlike in a very Christian sense, with him both being God the Father and the Son of God, led on perhaps by the Holy Spirit of his own conviction. It also helps that Nick portrays Gatsby as holy in a very romantic way. He does things like describe Gatsby's smile in a whole ass paragraph, and also gives him a very caring farewell before he's ultimately killed, with this long description. Tyler is very unabashed about his self-proclaimed godlike status. There are so many lines in his discography where he calls himself godly, maybe taking after one of his biggest inspirations, Kanye. These are especially prevalent in Igor, with the lines, hard to believe in God when there ain't no mirrors around in What's Good, well let's see if you're around a god around this time next year in A Boy Is a Gun, and just straight up saying I am a god on Cherry Bomb. And so if you've made it this far in the video, firstly, congratulations, and secondly, you must be wondering, what the heck was the point of comparing these two guys anyway? However interesting these parallels are, What is the actual significance of relating Tyler and Gatsby together? Well, really, I just did this for fun, but I think we can learn a lot if we compare both the circumstances of Tyler the creator and F. Scott Fitzgerald, the author of The Great Gatsby. To the dismay of many English students, I believe you can get a much better understanding of a work of art if you know the context behind its conception. 100 years after the release of The Great Gatsby, we're all in kind of a similar social situation as people were back in the 1920s. A deadly plague ravaged society from 1918 to 1920, followed by a period of raucous partying known as the Roaring Twenties in America. This emerged from an obvious desire to escape reality, especially since World War I had just preceded the 1918 pandemic. Today in 2021, during a pandemic which hopefully is now winding down, we can also expect to see big public events opening back up and going full force, with all of us collectively longing to interact with each other. But one more commonality we can notice between the art of the 1920s and the art of today is the growth of existentialism, surrealism, and a rejection of modern conventions. Generally, people were pushing the boundaries on how we perceived ourselves, the world around us, and the way we make art. I'm gonna get serious for a second, so I'm gonna take off these big glasses, also so I can see again. But I would also like to talk about some societal problems from the 1920s. A great deal of intolerance existed back then, with a very popular eugenics movement going strong in Western society. Tom's little rant about it towards the start of the book establishes him as this pseudo-intellectual, Joe Rogan viewer type asshole early on. But it's also really important to note that F. Scott Fitzgerald was not racially tolerant either, as he made really vile statements about black and Jewish people too. So Tom and Fitzgerald's mindsets were not that unique, rather they were very popular in the West at that time. We all know how this movement boils over in the 1940s as well. And even today, though obvious leaps and bounds have been made in terms of social equality, we still have a long way to go. It's a terrible shame that every member of a marginalized community has to be an activist for themselves these days. But that's why I appreciate Tyler's existence and Call Me If You Get Lost so much. It's just an unabashed celebration of who Tyler really is, a supremely talented bisexual black man, which is a difficult identity to have these days. This album is so uplifting, especially in a time that can so easily overwhelm you with darkness. The most significant difference between Call Me If You Get Lost and The Great Gatsby is their tone and their message. The Great Gatsby is undeniably a tragedy, one to rival that of Romeo and Juliet. As Nick wraps up the story, I find what he says about the characters of the book to be really poignant and sad. I am part of that. A little solemn with the feel of those long winters, a little complacent from growing up in the Caraway house in a city where dwellings are still called through decades by a family's name. I see now that this has been a story of the West after all. Tom and Gatsby, Daisy and Jordan and I were all Westerners, and perhaps we possessed some deficiency in common, which made us subtly unadaptable to Eastern life. At first, I really resented this idea, because I thought it was implying that your destiny is set in stone, and that you can't shake your true nature. But really, you could say that by disavowing themselves, and not being willing to acknowledge their backgrounds or their truths, ended up harming their future. Really? All the characters kind of asked for the terrible stuff that came their way, aside from the Wilsons, more or less. The Buchanans are caught up in their weird relationship and class expectations, Gatsby's unhealthy obsession drove him mad, and Nick was often an unreliable partner and friend. Tyler says something fundamentally important in Call Me If You Get Lost, which is, be yourself, like lines in Manifesto, and Where This Flower Blooms, and Massa. Tyler says, just do whatever you want. I'm not black, obviously, but I really appreciate the message that he sends to kids of color especially, who are trying to carve out a niche for themselves in the world, and trying to express themselves however they like. Obviously, and to be real with you for a second, being yourself doesn't guarantee you anything. I'm not trying to be one of those corny ass people who deliver you this tried and true cliche message, because I know it's annoying and I know you've heard it 1,000 times, but as Gerard Carmichael says on Igor, exactly what you run from, you end up chasing. What the Gatsby cast failed to realize is that you only have one lived experience, so you might as well make the most of it. This is all about your story, your life, your experience, your art, and your creativity. You can't really deny yourself, so why not embrace yourself? Even DJ Drama says, you only have one life to live. How far do you really want to take it? There's a real problem in this world where negativity and negative art are consistently celebrated. Our innate fascination with darkness and despair in art ultimately sends an unhealthy message to creatives everywhere. But call me if you get lost, to me, most importantly reinforces the idea that keeping a positive outlook on your own life and celebrating yourself is not a bad thing. It seems obvious, but sometimes it just makes something in your brain click when you hear it aloud like that, especially on an hour-long album. This album makes me feel like I have 1,000 times more swag, and that it's cool to be confident. Sometimes I feel like self-doubt is even romanticized amongst creatives, so it was really refreshing to hear the intro to Run It Up proclaim self-confidence so boldly. Kind of feel silly saying this too, because I know a lack of confidence is a very real issue for a lot of people, and even me from time to time. But like, if you know in your heart that something you make is good, it's good. If it sounds good, if it looks good, it's good. Sometimes the most simple thing can have such a big impact. I am personally tired of darkness. It is exhausting. That doesn't mean I won't dabble in it in my own creative works, because I certainly will, but to live it every day like that is really exhausting. I much prefer the reality embraced by Call Me If You Get Lost to that of The Great Gatsby. So I'll leave you now with a quote that I think about a lot by Kurt Vonnegut, who is a real person, don't worry. I think it wraps up what I'm trying to say really well. Thank you for listening. Practice any art, music, singing, dancing, acting, drawing, painting, sculpting, poetry, fiction, essays, reportage, no matter how well or badly, not to get money and fame, but to experience becoming, to find out what's inside you, to make your soul grow. Thank you again so much for watching. This is my first time really doing a long video essay like this, and I had a ton of fun. It was super fun writing this script, and I really enjoy the two things that I talked about over this course of this video. I love Tyler and I love Gatsby. So yeah, I mean, I really hope you enjoyed it too. I know it's a niche kind of video, but I hope you could get something out of it. If you did, why don't you consider leaving a like on this video? I'd appreciate that a lot, and it helped me out a ton. And also, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I do a lot of casual content here too, but I'm definitely doing more video essays in the future. This is like my bread and butter. Turn on notifications too if you want to know about every new upload as it comes out. I'm going to be trying to upload at least once every 3 weeks. So yeah, thanks for watching again. So I'll see you around, and I hope you have a nice day.